Let's do this. So yeah, today I want to share a little bit about technical SEO. Why, am I relevant to do this? It's a topic that I'm really passionate about. I use SEO on my blog. I rank #1 on Google for multiple topics. This brings me all of my traffic. I haven't written a blog article since February 2021, and I still have 1,000 users per month. My girlfriend works in content and SEO marketing from the marketing side, so I also understand the other side. And today I want to run you through, from the tech angle, what we need to do about SEO, where engineering and product have their different responsibilities, where marketing also have their different responsibilities. And hopefully we go through all that material in less than 40 minutes. So yeah, the 3 pillars of SEO are as such. First, you have the technical SEO. You need an optimized website. This is where engineering and PMs are responsible. This is where tech is responsible. And then the next 2 pillars are content and popularity. So then you need to have a content strategy in the middle with targeting specific keyword, doing keyword research, all of that, thing. And this is where marketing, specifically SEO, PR, content marketing, is responsible. And then you have the popularity aspect, where you need to boost your site's presence by doing what's called, link building, backlinks, and all that. And this is also where marketing is playing a big role. And this is where in some businesses, especially e-commerce businesses, or like funnel businesses like ours, this is where you have sometimes entire teams trying to build like campaigns and like reaching out to lists of like contacts at journalists and whatever to try to create backlinks and generate like this high ranking. So today I'm gonna show you only the first part, and the point is not that tech should take over content and popularity. This is left to marketing. So in our case, to Fabio's team, whether it's someone from growth or whether it's someone that is not in the roster yet that they have to figure out. But until now, what we were doing was with business development. Basically, business development, we're writing a couple of blog articles, and I was doing a bunch of the content and popularity hacks from the tech side. But like going forward, there's a clear kind of distinction, and we'll have to figure out with them what we do. So today I'm just going to dive on the first part. And the presentation agenda is going to follow the structure of search systems. You see a picture on the right of what a search system does, like Googlebot. So first, there's a crawl queue where you crawl all the websites that you have in your queue from the URL. The URL goes into the crawler. The crawler fetches the HTML, then it processes it, and then it renders it, and then when it's back, it indexes it in the search index, and then it ranks it, right? So the first part of my, we can split this in 3 parts. So first part is, how do you set up your website so that it gets crawled and indexed? The second part is, how do you set up your website so that the rendering and the ranking are performant or are good? And then the last part is that the Googlebot does this on a schedule. It keeps like recrawling everything, right? So you need to always monitor your SEO and make sure that over time it doesn't fall through the cracks or anything. So the third part is going to be about monitoring this SEO and ultimately as product, then prioritizing new SEO related tasks. That's the structure for today. So first part, crawling and indexing, how to make your website SEO ready. So there, in the next few slides, I'm just going to go through, I put this material together very quickly. The slides are not high quality and stuff. So I'm just going to go really quickly through the points. The material is there. You can go through it later. I'm just going to, bombard you with all the stuff that are on my mind or on my checklist when I build a SEO friendly website. So first thing is that you need to force a single domain. And the biggest issue that you have is usually you leave the www subdomain pointing to one website, and then you have the other website pointing to another, and then they count as 2 websites on Google side, and then your traffic is split and you don't understand why and all of that. For our use case, we don't have that problem because our website is already a subdomain. It's era.onefootball.com. Therefore, you cannot have www.era.onefootball.com. So we already said there. But if you had to wrestle with this issue, you would go into your domain registrar and stuff. So in our case, we use Verso. Yeah, but I'm just going to close the parenthesis. So first, you force a single domain. Then, a bit similarly, you force HTTPS traffic, because again, if you don't, then it means that every page can be in two flavors, HTTP and HTTPS. And then for Google, it's going to be super bad because traffic is going to land in two places and ranking is going to be different. Like, whereas you see for us, I just curled our website in HTTP, and you get redirects to HTTPS forced, and the code is 308, which is a special code that tells Google that it's gone, like, or it's redirected forever to HTTPS essentially. So we enforce HTTPS everywhere, right? The next part is this robot.txt. This file is what the Googlebot uses to know what they should or should not crawl on the website. Remember, we're in that phase of like crawling a website. So you need to tell Google somehow what to crawl. And this is what lies into that file. So that file is configured in code. It's generated automatically on our side. And there is a nice little tool called from Google called the robots testing tool that looks like this, where you can put in your URL. It will fetch the robots.txt, and it will tell you, it will show you all the policies you have in there. And then you can double check that's what you want. So for example, in our case, I was trying to access at the bottom here to access era1football.com/drops/FA, the AFA drop. And then with the current robot.txt, you see that actually that page is blocked, right? You see on the bottom right corner here that Googlebot sees that page as blocked because there's a policy inside robot.txt that says that we should not allow crawling on that page. So all of this is managed in the code from our side. And so, for example, what can happen is that we have a page up, we have a page live, like the AFA drops page, and we forget to remove it from robot.txt, and then it means that the Googlebot can actually access it. And so it's just something to keep in mind, that, and that's also on our release checklist, that when we release new pages, like for example, you see the profile here is disallowed because the profile should not be crawled in any way, because it's only like it's specific to a user, so it makes no sense to crawl it, whatever. So we just need to, it's a one-line change in the code, but we need to remember these things to like sort of remove pages that we don't want crawled using the robot.txt. The little brother from robots.txt is the sitemap. The sitemap is what Google uses to then navigate the site from one URL. Like if you arrive on era.onefootball.com, then Google will find the sitemap, and then thanks to the sitemap, will know all the other URLs that it needs to crawl, the Googlebot. And so it's important to have a sitemap.xml file ready. There's another tool in the Search Console called Sitemaps Explorer, I think, or something like this, where you can check your sitemaps. And you see here from the screenshot that we have the sitemap is all configured. We have 6 discovered URLs. So those are, the collection, the homepage, the collection page, and then 4 more pages. So privacy, FAQ or something. And then you have 2 blog articles or something like this. So like six pages. And so every time, like all of this is configured in code. So every time a new page comes in, the sitemap is generated automatically. And again, you can decide, we filter out profile, for example, from the sitemap. So Google doesn't know that there's a profile page, basically, right? And so yeah, and when a big change comes in, let's say we forgot to update sitemap, it's not our case, but like, we forgot to update sitemap and there's still the hat trick sitemap, then you can go into that Search Console and kind of manually tell Google to recrawl your new sitemap so that they refresh their crawling queue. All right, so as the next point is, and it's one of the last points from that section, is about, status code, so HTTP status code. So here, I didn't want to like put too many details, but there are cases like what I was saying with the HTTPS and the HTTP, where you need to tell the Google bots what to do with the pages, you know. So for example, the redirect you saw before is the code 308, which tells Google that actually every HTTP page should be counted as the HTTPS counterpart page. The 200 code just means all okay, so it's a good page. 404 means not found. 500 means server error, and then you can go in more detail. So 503 means service unavailable. So probably, you know, the page should be there, but it's currently down for some reason. It could be, you know, the marketplace page sometimes could be down, and then you could maybe give a 503 code, or maybe we decide something different, that the marketplace always gives you a 200 code, but then the user sees something like marketplace is down or whatever. Those are really just important for kind of corner cases, and they're also handled in the code. So for example, if tomorrow marketing comes to me and says, yeah, we need to kill the homepage and forward all traffic to the collection page, I will use like these HTTP codes to then tell Google that actually the homepage is a good page, but maybe we redirect the homepage with 308 to the collection page or something like this, you know, or, you know, so those are like more finer grain details that we can drive from the code side. And yeah, something that the last point on that section, which is related, is called canonical URLs. And so canonical URLs is like a more advanced kind of thing in the SEO metadata, and which allows you to tell Google that two pages are the same, right? Even though the two URLs are different, you tell Google that those two pages are the same, and you deduplicate the pages on the Google side this way. So this can be useful, for example, with UTM campaigns, because with UTM campaigns, you point to the Seria page, but you generate a bunch of UTM params. And if one of those UTM campaigns page becomes backlinked to and becomes big, Google will start ranking that one as almost as a separate page, because it has all these different things in the path, right? But because the canonical URLs are set correctly, that particular campaign page we tell Google that campaign page is the same than the actual Seria page, and therefore Google will not do that and will not index the UTM campaign page, you know. And so that's kind of the first way, the easy way, or like the starter way to talk about that. The more advanced use case is really more corner cases, to be honest, is the stuff that I put on the bottom right. That's something that I've set up on the website, which has given us so good results, and it's more of a growth hacking trick. But right now we have a blog on Medium where we write those with business development. We wrote a couple of blog posts there with a lot of like keywords, and you know, and I worked with business development with Luke, Tim, and Ferdi to craft those blog posts and target them properly. They live on Medium, but how do you then reap the SEO benefits from those articles? Well, what we did is that we added those pages a bit hidden on the website. So we have blog pages there with the same two blog articles. And then we set up the canonical URLs, you know, on the Medium side to tell Google that the Medium article is just a duplicate from the actual website article, right? So the website article, because it's hidden, your users will probably never see it. They will always see Medium, which has a nicer interface and stuff. But then you tell Medium that the original content is somewhere else, which means that when people Google for OneFootball NFT, instead of landing on Medium, they land on our website. And this is the sort of tricks where you know, you can hack the system a little bit, and this is pretty cool. Yeah, I think that concludes the first part about setting up for crawling and indexing. At this point, do you have any questions on that part, or is the
for the sake of time, no. Yeah, for the sake of time, no.
Okay, I can take the questions at the end if we have a bit more time, you know. All right, so once you've crawled and indexed your page and you've set up your website so that it's SEO ready in that sense, you still need to set up your website so that it's SEO ready in another sense, which is rendering and ranking. So you need to make sure that your website renders correctly and that the ranking is good on the Google side. So the first thing here is that web is a graph. And again, you know, my slide, like I came up with those slides like really briefly. So you can dive into way more details here, but essentially web is based on, like Google is based on the PageRank algorithm, which is like essentially a graph algorithm between nodes, which are entities or pages, and edges, which are links between two pages. And so once you know that, in the algorithm like that they patented, the Google guys at the very beginning, has essentially not changed much. Like, it has refined a lot with many more ways to generate features, many more ways to understand nodes and edges and to weight them and rank them. But essentially, it's still the same thing. And once you've understood that, it means that if you want your product, your website, let's say era1football.com, to rank properly on Google, it means you need your product to be a graph, right? It means that it needs to be a graph somehow if you want it to rank. So what does it mean? Well, in our world, we have collections, right? Collections are entities, are nodes on the graph. We have football teams, football players. They're all part of that graph. And then we have, maybe those collections are linked together because we're doing a collection crossover, whatever. And then the Serie A will link to AFA, or somehow we have a collection directory which unifies all the collections. So on that directory, the Serie A page is linked to, the AFA page is linked to, etc., etc. We might have, if you Google for Suarez NFTs, we might not have a deal with Suarez, but because we know that Suarez plays for a certain club in Argentina, and we have AFA, and then we're able to like link Suarez back to our AFA NFT collection page. And then when you Google for Suarez NFT, you end up on the AFA collection page. So this is like, as product, there's like, because we're going to do e-commerce and we are going to try to, I guess, leverage a lot of the organic traffic to sell NFTs, I guess we need to have this in mind, that we're building this graph. This is quite high level, but it's important. So then, in a more kind of practical detail, I'm not going to go through all the points here, but there's a way to create like meaningful and clean URLs that actually give you like very strong ranking. So I put a couple of I put the theory on the right. You have kind of a few things, like you need semanticness, you need patterns, you need to be keyword focused. So those words in the URL needs to be understandable. And you need to avoid parameters, right? So I put a couple of examples on the left. So for example, good is collection Serie A, like we have it. Bad would be collection /1, because then you have a parameter that no one except your database understands, right? It might be that Serie A is collection with ID 1, that's fine. But neither your user or the Google bot understands that 1 means Serie A. And the second example here would be, for example, for one of the blog articles that I mentioned, has this very long title with plenty of keywords because we're doing like keyword hacking. But the slug of that blog post in the URL is football NFT projects, 3 semantic keyword focused words. It's not a part of the title, like like we used to see on WordPress, where it's like it starts with something and then it's too long, so then we kept the title, a comprehensive list of, and then you're done, right? So those are 2 examples. So for us, so far so good with the collections folder, and then each collection within that folder. I think it makes total sense, and we need to keep that in mind for the rest. So all of this is configured in the code. In the backend, we have those discussions of like, what is the slug? We call this slug. What is the slug that we use for that page? And so we drive this all from the engineering side. Okay, so then the next point is, to render properly, you need to use the right rendering strategies. And there are 4 big rendering strategies. And the key point here is the point in pink, which is that faster websites mean better rankings. And Google, in the recent years, is really forcing the markets to move towards more performant web pages, and in particular, these statically generated sites. So in the recent years, you have this big thing we call the jump stack. And so the whole stack for web development has moved from SPA, single page applications, towards now static site generation. And those sites are super performant, and it's all because Google forces you to do that, right? But it's all for good reason, and you will understand why. So the 4 different rendering strategies are static site generation. That means that the page is built ahead of time. So if you look at the page, it has HTML, and then maybe some references to CSS and JS in there. But like essentially the HTML is already kind of big. It's already meaningful on its own. and that page is on the server. That page is on the CDN, on the content delivery network, and that is the page that the Google bots will consume, and that is the page that your users will first fetch. So on the first request, when you request a page, you first download the bit of HTML. Your users will already download like a scaffolding of the page with some content in there. This is super cool because it means that you know, your content is already all there. So then Google can do all the algorithm about, you know, they don't care about the looks of the page too much. They care more about the content. So then they can do all the algorithm of understanding your page content with titles and stuff, and then linking that back to other pages and stuff. So so that's why, like, this is super important. This is what we do for the most part. For simple pages, like for example, you know, the homepage is statically generated, the blog articles are statically generated, privacy FAQ are statically generated. As soon as you enter a more dynamic page, you move over to the right here, which is server-side rendering. So server-side rendering, you will have upon requests, when the user requests the page, like a web server running Node.js in this case will generate the page with a bunch of server-side logic and spit out the HTML and with all the content in there. So that is good because sometimes you need that, because you need the page to be dynamic, you need the page to call a database, you need the page to maybe call the blockchain or whatever. That is bad as well, because it means that, you know, there's a bit of delay, right? When you call the page, the server needs to do some work and then give you the page back. Whereas with static generation, you call the page was already stored there. Boom, you get the page back. So server-side rendering, that's what we do for the Seria page, because, you know, the Seria pages, like the collection page, I mean, right now they look static, but they, like, semantically behind them, they are like dynamic, because you could have like different collections. You could fetch the price from the latest drop live. You know, there's a bunch of dynamic parts to that page, and then there's ways to mitigate like the little delay that you get when you do server-side rendering. So you can do a bunch of caching. You can be smart about the way you do the queries to the database so that it's faster. Like there's a few ways. There's actually also this third way, where we move to the right, which is called incremental static generation, and this is an improvement over server-side rendering, where you would you know, speed out a statically generated page, which then just refreshes on the server side just a small part of it, right? So this think of a blog feed, right? You statically generate like the top 10 articles or something, but then if you want to scroll down, you need to fetch the rest dynamically from the server or something like this. So initially you get some static generation, and then you get some incremental generation as well. Then the last one on the right, that's what we should not do anymore, and that's what React and all single page apps were, which is client-side rendering. So what happens in that case is that you request a page that basically the HTML is empty. It's just one line there that tells you it's a document, and then everything is in JavaScript from the browser, and then the user's browser does all the work of like rendering the page and understanding the content. And this is where the web has been doing like back and forth. You know, the web started way on the left with static site generations, where people were creating HTML, putting them on FileZilla and statically hosting. And then it went all the way to the right with all this like fancy JavaScript, where we overkilled everything with JavaScript. Now it's coming back to the left with like power to JavaScript, but doing it smartly with like static site generation. And then probably, you know, if tomorrow Google changes their algo, like it could go in any direction, because at the end you're just changing. You know, if tomorrow Google says no, we want everything from the client, then, you know, you will have to follow what they're doing, right? So that's it for rendering strategies. So we know all of this. We have a framework that allows for all of this, Next.js. So, you know, we got all of this covered, and there might be from time to time optimization tasks like we had for the collection page before release 1, where, you know, we need to then invest a bit more into, you know, we might start with either static site generation or server-side rendering to get fast, and then at some point we want to optimize it, and so that might like take a bit more work, but overall we're just set up for success here. All right, so once you've rendered your pages properly, how do you make sure they're understood and stuff? So the first thing goes with the meta tags, so the title and description. So here, really, like as part of the onboarding checklist for all my engineers, I asked them to download this extension called Detailed. I put the link to the Chrome web store here, and I encourage like PMs to also download that extension. That extension will give you everything SEO, right? It has multiple tabs, and I'm going to go through a few of those tabs. The first tab is the overview tab. It will tell you the title and description and the canonical URL that we mentioned about before. It will tell you also some keywords that it found and some structure about the page, the language, the word count, whatever. Here, what you're looking for is like, there should be a title, of course. And here, like, it tells you that detail tells you that the length is okay, but there's no like good or bad length. The titles and descriptions are just super important for keywords. So, when you're reviewing a website or QAing a website, you can open this tab and then you look at, okay, here it speaks about video moves. It doesn't speak about NFTs, right? That's what management wants. They don't want NFTs. So NFTs should not be in title and description. Otherwise, like all Google will see is NFTs, right? So here it says era by OneFootball. It says video moves from Serie A. That's good. And by the way, this is the homepage title and description. So you see that on the homepage, we put Serie A because of this management. It's like this Serie A takeover kind of thing. But in the future, we might do something else. Description is, again, digital video movements, so another keywords, etc. Leagues, clubs, and players, so a bunch of keywords. So title and description are a big one. Then the next ones are headings. And this is what we call on-page SEO. So all those semantics on the page. And you see on that tab headings that you can see all the headings from that page. And there are a few rules, right? And we try to enforce those rules on the engineering side. We don't have end-to-end tests for this stuff, so we catch that in reviews and in QA mostly at the moment manually. But there's a way to automate this. So the few rules are: they should be exactly one H1 per page. this is how Google works. Like it needs one H1, not two, and not zero, right? So. And then there should be no gaps between the different levels of headings, right? So you go from H1 to H2, H2 from H3, H3 back to H2, etc. You don't go from H2 to H4, And then the titles themselves should be human readable and packed with keywords. But then we don't choose the copy in our setup. But when I'm writing a blog post, you just do a bunch of like keyword engineering here. Like you put, so here you see, and why? Because it's important for your users, of course, but mostly for the Googlebot, because the Googlebot will pass the H tag structure of the document to understand the content. And then actually Google does a bunch of NLP on different levels. So you can do NLP just on the titles to get a representation in vectors, and then also within computes a representation of the paragraph within a title to then get a more fine grain representation. But for Google, the title and for a good copywriter, like the title should summarize the paragraph that comes after it, right? So, for example, here, from fans for fans, I guess Google assumes that there's a lot of fun stuff that comes, right? And then here we have 3 subheaders that go in more details. Be the first to own moments you love, create and build your club collection, moments will unlock never seen experiences, etc., etc. Right? So all of those titles, in our case, they come from the copy that we put in components. So here from the SEO side, we map the design a little bit, right? There's a component called History in the Making, which comes before the component that says Serie A collection, right? And all of that stuff. Yeah. So the next one is about Facebook Open Graph. So there is another tab in there called Social, where you can check how we parameterize everything so that the Facebook graph understands the website. So you see that it has the right tag title, it has the right description, it's using the right image. This is all so that people, when they share the page on Facebook or on Twitter, I come to Twitter in a sec. This is also so that it works. So the next one is Twitter. There's something called the Twitter card validator, where you can check how your page looks on Twitter. There's also URL sharing, and remember we had an issue with that where we had the whole image. When you share the URL with yourself, you see a title, a description, and an image. Those are the SEO tags from the graph that I just showed you before. The next thing is called structured data. This is a bit more advanced. It's called JSON-LD, and this is what allows you to go for what's called position 0. So this is what allows Google to really understand the more advanced data on your page and then puts that on the top. So for example, you might have seen when you Google Neymar, you have all those like Wikipedia cards and stuff on the right. This is all like the structure from the Google Knowledge Graph. And then you can sort of help Google to get there by telling the Google bot that on your page, you have a bunch of structured data. So for example, recipes, job posts, blog articles, FAQs, question and answers, videos, for YouTube. So all of those are like very well understood JSON LD types, and we all set up in the code base to do that really well. You can see here the collection, the Seria page in the rich result test tool, and it has 2 valid items, one FAQ and 1 videos. So hopefully one day when people ask why is the Flow why OneFootball went for the Flow blockchain, our FAQ which is on our page and which is registered as structured data for Google will show up in position 0, and then we take half the page and people can just play around with the FAQ. That's it for that. That's it for that side. I'm gonna try to rush through the last part in the 8 minutes that I have left in my recording, and then we can take the questions. So the last part, once you've set up your website for indexing, crawling, and then ranking and rendering, you move to the last part, which is that you need to keep that going. You need to monitor that, and we use tools for that. So you not only you monitor the SEO performance, but then you need to prioritize the work and in tickets and stuff like, because then you need to always improve that SEO or make sure that it doesn't go down, right? First tool we use is this page speed tool from Google. It can tell you the performance of your page, and again, Google will penalize slow websites, so we need to have a fast website. You see that our story on desktop is very good. We have 94%. On mobile, our story is not so good. It's 56%. So conclusion is we have issues on mobile that can or should be prioritized, right? Like there, we need to understand what are those issues. I can tell you, spoiler, it's because of the heavy assets that we have and all the videos we have. So then how do we go and fix them? Do we need to, for mobile, do we need to remove a couple of videos, or do we, all of that then needs to be prioritized against new features and all of that, right? The next one, which is kind of which touches that are the core web vitals. So, Google has a set of metrics that they use to measure your website. And if you perform well, they will boost you. If you perform poorly, they will, penalize you. So those are LCP, FID, CLS. I'm not gonna, go into details. I've left references. Those things we are set up to report on them, so we can, we can track them in Google Analytics. We can track them in other tools as well, with like Lighthouse or whatever. We can try to get a diagnostic of how good are we, how bad are we. I'm also using Versal Insights there to get an idea of real world data, because your users, based on the connectivity they have, the device they have, they will experience different largest contentful paint and all of that. So then in order to optimize all of this, there's a bunch of, you can do a lot of things in the lab, quote unquote, but then you also need to measure your real world data, and you cannot achieve like 100% performance on all these metrics and stuff. They are just there to understand, okay, how good or how bad is our website, The next one is the Google Search Console, of course. So this is where marketing lives quite a lot, but on the engineering side, we can go there and understand, the number of clicks on our website and the number of impressions, and what are the queries that users are entering. So, for example, you see our top queries are OneFootball NFT and era OneFootball, and you see the impressions, they are mostly weekly cyclic a little bit, with a low, like you see the clicks are below 60, but it's like a weekly cycle. So it means that we're getting this real organic traffic, and now it's all about like improving that bump, right? Like from slowly but surely, we are going to improve that weekly bump, and then every week you're going to have like a lot of users that just come back naturally because they're googling for OneFootball NFT or whatever. The other thing you see from the Google Search Console is your pages, your coverage in terms of pages. So you can check for errors, valid and excluded pages, and you see that we don't have any erroneous pages right now. But as the site grows, it could happen that some of the crawl pages give you an error, so you can get notified about those errors via email or using like this dashboard, you know, and then prioritize a bug fix for those pages. And yeah, and then that's it for Google Search Console. The next tool is called Ahrefs. So this is one of those tools that does like keyword volume research and stuff like this. By the way, all those tools are actually, you know, using directly or indirectly like planted trackers that track users' behavior without their consent. And this is how they know that certain keywords are searched more than others, and the whole data has to be taken with a pinch of salt because they are not 100% representative. They are not Google. But the interesting thing about those tools is that they can run site audits. So you see here the screenshot of our site's audit, and we have 96% performance. So it's amazing. It's better than you know, a lot of sites. And then it can also tell you what are the top issues, right? So it prioritizes them in terms of red, yellow, and blue and stuff. So right now, one of the top issues, meaning to go from 96 to 100, we will need to fix all of those. So one is that we have an orphan page, which, you know, we have a page on the website that no other page links to. So because the web is a graph, you know, this is a very bad thing. We have a page that has links to a broken page. We have an image file that's too large, etc., etc. Right? So, and then we can go and like create bug tickets or something for those, and then prioritize them and like fix them, and they will give you an incremental gain of like 1 point in that site audit, and maybe Google then, you know, is nicer to you thanks to that. I mean, at this stage we are just set up good, and we can just use that. We can run those like, you know, periodic things, and then I receive like an email for every crawl, and I can tell, you know, if suddenly with a release I go from 96 to 86, yes, we have to fix something. But to go to 96 to 95, yeah, we can live with that, and we have other stuff to do at this point. We're good already. All right, and that concludes it. I will stop here so that the recording, you know, is in time, and then we can take questions. All right. So how do where is my stop sharing, and then hold on, where's my record?